Welcome. Good morning, good day, and good evening to all of our global participants, and welcome to the Global Good Funds Health Equity Forum. My name is Patty Obermaier, and I lead the U.S. Health and Life Sciences business here at Microsoft. I'm honored to be here today to moderate this amazing forum. Health equity is a critical need across our planet. According to the World Health Organization and the World Bank, half of the world lacks access to essential health services, and over 100 million people are driven into extreme poverty because of health expenses. We know this is a multifaceted issue, and social determinants of health, such as race, ethnicity, sex, age, disability, socioeconomic status, and geographic locations all contribute to an individual's ability to achieve good health. The Global Good Fund has convened a panel of experts that are with us here today to explore this critical issue and what we can do to impact it. So let's talk about the amazing people that I have here today that are going to join me on this panel. First, we have LaRonda Chastang, who is Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Trinity Health. She is responsible for the development and implementation of Trinity's DEI strategy that impacts more than 110,000 colleagues, nearly 26,000 physicians and clinicians that are delivering care in diverse communities across 25 states. Next, we have Carrie Rich. Carrie is CEO of the Global Good Fund, and she will share with us today the role GGF is playing within the health sector. Carrie is an author of 3 books and is the recipient of the Daily Record's Most Admired CEO Award, Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year Award, and Politico's Women Who Rule Award. And she's a mom of some very young children, so I really have no idea when Carrie sleeps at all. Next, we have Danny Weisberg. Danny is CEO and co-founder of Voiceitt. He is a serial entrepreneur with international experience in health care, AI, and voice technologies. Danny's company uses AI speech recognition technology to allow people with non-standard speech to communicate more easily with others. And we have Syed Abrar, who is the founder and CEO of Liber Health. He is solving the problem of patient misidentification and lack of healthcare data interoperability among health systems. Syed is personally driven to build next generation digital solutions, working for the patient and the patient empowerment and driving positive social impact. So we have an incredible group of speakers here today. And again, thank you all for joining us from around the globe. If you have a question for anyone on the panel, feel free to put your questions in the chat. We've got some folks that are monitoring that chat, and we want to make sure we address what's top of mind for you. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to LaRonda to kick us off and share with us her work at Trinity and how she is making an impact in the area of health equity. LaRonda?
Thank you so much, Patty, for not only your wise words setting us up, but that really gracious introduction. I am so honored to share the virtual stage with you, with Carrie, with Danny, and Syed. I'm equally as proud and honored to really lead with the support of our senior leadership, as well as our board of directors, diversity, equity, and inclusion at Trinity Health. We have limited time, and I could probably spend the whole hour talking, but I understand the assignment. And so what I'd like to do is to briefly talk about really the root causes of inequity and really lean into that. And then I'll share a little bit about the work that we're doing at Trinity Health. But I want to start really talking about those root causes of inequalities, highlighting the facts that confirm that the systems that govern our lives, particularly in the US, are in fact producing the results that they were designed to produce. Now, the World Health Organization often talks about or says that health inequities are systemic differences in the opportunities that groups have to achieve optimal health, leading to unfair and avoidable health outcomes. And that part is really important, the unfair and avoidable health outcomes. And across the world, and specifically in the US, our world is governed by a set of systems, and those systems are our financial system, our education system, our legal or justice system, our political systems. And all these things work together as part of an interconnected network that is designed to produce a set of outcomes. So this interconnected network is, in part, it shapes the norms and values of our society, that these systems assign authority and allocate resources in a specific way to accomplish goals and provide benefits that society needs as a whole, like economic prosperity of its citizens, security at our borders, transportation infrastructure, as well as healthcare. But what does it mean if the system, the design of the system is flawed, that the very blueprint that it was designed off of includes some and exclude others? Now, the murder of George Floyd and the COVID-19 pandemic exposed significant gaps and disparities in every area of American society. Those examples can be seen in healthcare, housing, education, criminal justice, immigration status, financial well-being. So let me share just a few statistics to further support my claim that the system itself is broken and that the system itself helps to produce the inequalities that we see. Now, since the 1950s, there have been no progress towards income or wealth equality between Black and white households in the US, and that Black Americans are incarcerated at 5 times the rates of their white counterparts. And Black men in the US on average receive sentences that are 19% longer than those white men convicted of the same crime. Schools in predominantly BIPOC communities or Black, Indigenous, people of color communities are more likely to resemble prisons than institutions of learning. Black, Indigenous, and people of color, or AKA BIPOC communities, are roughly 2.5 times more likely to live in poverty than white people. Black women are twice as likely to experience maternal death at childbirth than white women. And Black infant deaths are 2.3 times higher than white infant deaths. Now, youth of color, they are disproportionately suspended or expelled from school at a rate of 2 to 3 times that of their white counterparts for similar behaviors. And the National Equity Atlas reveals that our national GDP could be 14% or $2 trillion higher if the wage disparities between white employees and Black and BIPOC employees were eliminated. Now, persistent institutional racism, bias, and discrimination as deeply racialized systems has cost the US. I dare say it has cost the globe. Now, dating back as far as the 1800s, there are numerous recorded abuses in healthcare. The first, before I speak about healthcare, the first would be when the colonial government distributed blankets tainted with smallpox to indigenous populations. Genocide and forced removal of the indigenous populations have contributed to a pattern of loss, which leads to health impact in that community. Dr. Marion Sims, he's often considered the father of gynecology. Most of what we know about modern obstetrics and gynecology was a result of his medical experiments on enslaved Black women. And he perpetuated this belief that Blacks have thicker skin and experience pain less, right? That we experience less pain just simply because our skin is Black. And he perpetuated this notion that Blacks were inherently and just different. Now, many of you are aware of the Tuskegee Experiments, where the U.S. Public Health Service conducted a study on 600 Black men to track their progress without treatment, right? And these men never consented because they were never told that it was an experiment. So they didn't get to opt out of the study. And it's important to note that penicillin became available during this study, yet the study and the researchers denied men access to care. Latino women are forcibly targeted for sterilization procedures by our US government in Puerto Rico and California. In addition, there's a mistrust of the healthcare system overall. Now, I know that these things are complex and intersectional issues like homelessness and incarceration and disability and mental health, social trauma, community violence, and so on and so forth. But what has to be understood that there is a root cause for the health inequities that we see. And more than that, that there's a root cause of the health inequities, I am excited that we are on the front end, I think at a time in history where we are talking about dealing with upstream or root cause issues so that we can eliminate health disparities. And so because I know my time is short, I'm going to stop there because I know we have a dynamic panel and we're going to get into lots more discussion. And so Patty, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you, LaRonda, and thank you for setting the stage and the challenges that we've got in the system and that we're getting the output that we designed in the system. And I'm excited to say we're starting to see some questions come through the chat. So hopefully we're going to get to those questions. Now let's turn it over to Carrie Rich. Carrie, how is the Global Good Fund addressing health equity through its work in the health sector?
Thank you, Patty, and thank you, LaRonda, for that informative introduction and background. You know, the reality is that we have the system that we were designed to have. And the question is, how do we uplift all members of our society given the system that we have? And I wanted to take our group back here 10 years when the Global Good Fund was founded. My personal background is I had transitioned from healthcare delivery systems, so working in the healthcare setting, how we deliver care in hospitals. And what I was thinking about was, how do we prevent people from landing in the hospital in the first place? And the way we do that is by tackling the social determinants of health. These are the social causes that land people in healthcare institutions. And those social causes include the 5 pillars where the Global Good Fund focuses our work. And those 5 pillars include health, including access to health care and preventive health services, education, that means access to quality educational services that long-term creates access to future job stability and growth. It includes sustainability, clean air to breathe, clean water to drink, access to quality food and nutrition. It also includes financial inclusion. That means the ability to access financial systems in fair and equitable ways. And also economic mobility. This is the opportunity to advance on the economic ladder to create a sustainable income financially for oneself and one's family. So these are the 5 sectors where the Global Good Fund focuses. And what we do is we look across the country and around the world in more than 40 countries globally to find incredibly talented entrepreneurs who are using their lives to build enterprises that positively impact society in one of these 5 domains. And we have the pleasure of hearing from 2 such entrepreneurs, Danny and Syed, in a few minutes. What the Global Good Fund does is we believe that if we invest in the leadership of the entrepreneur, we can in turn help these entrepreneurs grow phenomenally impactful businesses that are also financially viable. And as a premise, the Global Good Fund believes that great ideas are equally distributed, but great opportunities are not equally distributed. And so we really focus on identifying entrepreneurs who will most benefit from a platform to share their ideas and their positive impact with the world. Domestically, half of our entrepreneurs are women and 2/3 are Black or Brown entrepreneurs, and the numbers increase as we go globally. By comparison, women represent 2.8% of the venture capital industry in terms of investments received, and Black and Brown entrepreneurs represent 0.8% of the market as compared to 66% of the Global Good Fund entrepreneurs. And so the opportunity here is not only to create businesses and help scale businesses that positively impact society by contributing to those positive social determinants of health, but in addition, we look to invest in entrepreneurs coming from underrepresented communities that are traditionally not supported by the general market. Thank you, Patty.
Wonderful, Carrie, and thank you for all the work you're doing for the Global Good Fund and the investing that we're doing in social entrepreneurs that are impacting their community and impacting the 5 pillars that you meant. So now let's hear from a Global Good Fund fellow alumni. Danny, can you share with the audience the work that you're doing at Voiceitt?
I'm trying to unmute. Oh, made it. Okay. Thank you so much, Patty, and thank you, Carrie, for inviting me. It's a really great honor to be here with the panel and with LaRonda and with Syed. And I would love to share a bit more about what we're doing at Voiceitt. So in Voiceitt, we took the challenge of building a technology that will give people with speech disabilities their voice back by making speech recognition accessible to everyone. And the best way to show it is by showing a short video. So here it is.
I want to be a firefighter when I grow up. My mom says it's too dangerous, but I think it's only dangerous if there is a fire. I was born 12 weeks before my expected birth date. Is 1.9 pounds heavy or light? I want to speak, but the words remain inside me. People just don't understand me. My name is Ray. I'm 5 years old, and tomorrow I will start speaking freely.
I love you.
So I actually started the company, and the idea came from a personal experience in my family. More than 15 years ago, my beloved grandmother had a stroke. She was the center of the family, but after having a stroke, it changed a lot. She lost her independence, she lost a lot of her motor abilities, and one of the most painful aspects was that her speech became unintelligible. And when we wanted more than ever to be able to communicate with her, we couldn't understand what she's saying. And that was a very painful experience for all the family and, of course, for her. But I did realize something, and what I've seen is that the nurse in the rehabilitation hospital could understand my grandmother. And that was kind of an insight, because I realized that the nurse can understand her because she got used to my grandmother's unique way of speaking, because she's there all the time. And this is what happens in 100% of the cases when a person has a speech disability. The mother will understand her child even if he was born with cerebral palsy or Down syndrome, while others can't. So with this understanding, we thought maybe we can build a software that can do the same with what is called today machine learning and AI. You can train the software, and the software will learn the person's way of speaking and enable him to communicate with anyone, not only with his close caregiver. So in the next slide, you're going to see a young lady, and she was born with cerebral palsy, but although she was born with cerebral palsy, she doesn't let it go in her way. She's very independent, super intelligent and friendly, but the most painful aspect is that when she speaks, people usually don't understand her, and also they assume the wrong thing about her cognitive ability. So when she speaks, she sounds like this. Try to see if you can understand what she says.
Now I can start speaking freely.
Now, usually people don't understand what she said, but after she trained our software was able to build a personalized speech engine for her, and it can now translate her speech.
Now I can
Now I can
start
start
speaking freely.
speaking freely.
Now, this technology opens up so much for her and potentially for millions of people with speech disabilities. It can open up so much potential for them. Another thing that we've realized is that our technology integrated into smart homes, personal assistant, and smart cars, and everything that now is becoming more and more voice enabled can really unlock much more for people with speech and motor disability and can give them much more independence in their lives. We received investments and support from Microsoft and Amazon. And with Amazon specifically, we received a special permission to integrate the Alexa API into our application. This means that anyone who has a speech disability and cannot use Alexa can now use it through our application. And people with speech and motor disability needs Alexa or Google Assistant more than us, because it can really give them much more independence in their lives. So in the next video, you're going to see Michael, who is using this integrated solution of Voiceitt and Alexa to gain much more independence in his life and do things that he could not do without it.
Hello, I'm Michael.
Hello, I'm Wendy,
And
this is our Life with Voiceitt.
they developed this wonderful scene which you will see. Alexa, light on.
Okay. You have no idea on how many doors you're going to be opening for so many people.
Alexa, TV off.
Like I said, you have no idea how much this means to him. No idea. We waited for this for so long, and we thought that this would never happen. Okay. This is such a wonderful gift in so many ways.
And with that, I will give back the mic to Patty. Thank you.
Wow, Danny, such inspirational work and such amazing things you're doing for folks and opening up doors and aspects of their life that they probably thought were always closed. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Syed, who will share the work that he's doing at Liber Health. Syed?
Am I unmuted now?
Yes, thank you.
Oh,
Okay, good.
thank
You're
God.
good to go.
Oh, hey, Patty, thank you. Thank you for having me. Danny, I love what you're doing. Like it almost made me cry. It's so inspirational. I love that. I feel like most of us who dive into social entrepreneurship do it because we experience some kind of injustice in our lives. And similarly, my journey with health equity began in 2016, 2015. Imagine rushing your family member to the hospital in an emergency, but the doctors are unable to provide the right treatment because they either get the medical records of the wrong person or they don't even have access to the complete patient history to begin with. That's exactly what happened to my brother during his liver cancer treatments, where he was given wrong medications, which led to his death. A lot of medical errors were made, and obviously he was transferred to many different hospitals. Each time I would go to the staff and ask for his patient file, and they would outright deny handing it over. I would then reach out to my personal connections, work behind the scenes to get those medical records, which belong to us to begin with. It got me wondering, if I am having so much trouble with my considerable resources, what about the rest of the people? What about the people who do not have national IDs or social security numbers, who do not have insurance or fall into poverty or simply don't even know that they have the right to their own health information? After my brother passed away, I set off on a journey. I kept asking the question, if we can send a tweet to millions of people around the world, why is it so difficult to send health information to caregivers and the patients? My goal was to understand what was missing to make this a reality and how can I help with my expertise in information technology. My search brought me to 3 key points, which I believe will allow care providers to see the complete picture of a patient's health, regardless of their status, their ethnicity, or their financial background. First, we need to be able to identify patients instantly and reliably in any kind of situation using their biometrics, like their face and eyes, just like we as humans identify each other when we meet someone. Second, we need to create a trusted network between these different organizations, which enables secure health data transfers. And third, absolute privacy. No piece of information moves without the explicit permission of the patient. Combining these different aspects, we created a digital identity platform which identifies people using their eyes and transfers their medical records via the blockchain network. The best part is every bit of personal information is encrypted with the patient's biometrics. which means even we do not know what's stored on the blockchain. And just to clarify, there is no cryptocurrency involved. We use permission blockchain, an example of which is a blockchain network used by the Estonian government to transfer health information. When we built the MVP and started demoing it, we realized through feedback that the technology doesn't just solve the problem of patient misidentifications and health data interoperability, but it also prevents duplicate medical records, denied insurance claims, and identity fraud and thefts. Similarly, different use cases were also realized. For example, health data management for refugees and displaced populations. These people are moved from one camp to another. They don't have any IDs. They live in the worst possible condition. They are the most in need of medical care, but the medical records are lost whenever they are moved from one place to another. Currently, we're working on securing our IP, filing for US patents, and preparing to publish our research papers. At the end of the day, what we're trying to do here is very important and very personal to us. I realize it is an immense undertaking. It may even sound comical or naive, and believe me, I have heard all the negative comments. I realize that it may not become a reality in my lifetime, perhaps, but I'm a strong believer that the seeds we sow now will bear fruits for our generations to come. And that, I believe, goes for all of us. And isn't that the whole point? To leave the world in a better place, in a better state than we found it, even if it's just a little bit. Well, that's it for me. Thank you for listening to my rant. I swear I didn't mean it to be so morbid. I apologize for that. Back to you, Patty.
Thanks, Syed, and thanks for helping us lead the world. I'm sure the work that you're doing will have a wonderful impact. Speaking of the world and speaking of health equity, I'd like to start with a question to LaRonda and your work at Trinity. What do you think is the biggest misconception about health equity that you have to tackle?
Oh, that's a big question, Patty, but thank you for the question. So the biggest misperception about health inequity, and this isn't specific to Trinity, I think it's healthcare providers, those who do community-based healthcare, is that health inequities are the result of the person. That is something that the person has caused, right? That they either have not accessed healthcare or something that they have done personally, their own health behavior that is contributing to the health inequity, versus acknowledging and understanding the system itself and how the systems that we live in, work in, play in, worship in, contribute to those inequities that we see. And of course, that's in healthcare, but it's in every aspect of our life. So I think one of the biggest misperceptions, and research will bear this out, is that it's not the inequities aren't based on my behavior, but more than 50% of my health outcome is based upon where I live, my zip code, or where I am, you know, what are those external influences to my life? So I certainly appreciate that question, Patty.
And LaRonda, let me just follow up with you on that one, because I think in healthcare, one of the questions we have in addition to the system is the AI models and some of the biases we have today in those models, which I'm curious what you think about that, and do you include that in the system that you're referencing?
Absolutely. So what is exciting about what the work that the Global Good Fund does and the social entrepreneurs is that you're bringing people to the table who aren't historically at the table. And when you bring diversity of thought to the table, and we're specifically talking about technology, you get that diversity of opinion and perspectives built into the very foundations of the advancement. The fact is we have to catch up, because the current AI, as well meaning as it is, bias is inherently built in it, because those who are building and advancing that technology are people. So the technology is only as good as the people designing it, right? So bias is built into the amazing advancements that are happening. And so how we diminish that or mitigate that is to ensure that the people who you're developing that technology for are also involved in the architect, involved in that system at the ground level.
You know, at Microsoft, we have the belief that we can't develop products for everyone if not everyone is represented at the table and while we're developing those products. So I totally agree with you on the diversity of those at the table. Carrie, I know you've been watching the chat coming in from our folks out there around the world. Any good questions you want to tee up with our panelists here today?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, good.
Great. We have a bunch of questions, so thank you for sharing your questions, and please continue to share more. You know, one of the challenges and opportunities is that health inequity is pervasive, and it can happen all over the country, all around the world. So the question from the audience here is, what are some specific actions we can take to rebuild health equity in our local community? Syed, would you want to take a stab at that question?
Yeah, one of the things that jumps to mind, which I recently took part in, was volunteering for the vaccine drives for COVID in the underserved communities here in Karachi. It was part of an NGO, and I was asked not to mention it because that was a donor program. And I basically took part in setting up camps for the COVID vaccination and providing my services, my expertise in the data management and how much vaccines were being deployed, administered during the drive. So I believe that even if you do not have the right infrastructure in place, you can still go ahead and volunteer and try to build that system, try to build it for the local communities, even if it's for that short period where it's most needed at that time.
Thank you, Syed. And LaRonda, do you have thoughts? What would your thoughts be about what folks can do at a local level to support health equity in their community?
My answer probably won't be as desirable or sexy, right? However, I think at the local level, it is critically important for people to get engaged in like advocacy or political work, whether that's running for a local office, volunteering, but policies help shape systems, right? And determines who gets resources and who's at the table and who has access to power. So even at the local level, I would say get involved. In my own personal life, I sit on our school board. So all of the ways in which that you can influence your local community, get involved politically, talk to your elected officials. And if there aren't opportunities for that, you know, I always say if there's no seat at the table, either bring a folding chair or create your own table.
Amazing. Thank you. Danny, a question for you. So there's a lot of inequity around digital health and health technology. Could you talk about how you are addressing the digital divide, especially with underrepresented communities?
So yes, definitely. First of all, I think maybe one of the biggest misconceptions is that you know, making products accessible, inclusive, this is good for the world, this is social inclusion, but business-wise, not so important or not so interesting. And this is a very big misconception because people with special needs are the biggest minority group. 25% of the world has any sort of special needs. So not supporting products accessibility for those 25% is losing a lot of money. And I think, Patty, you know, at Microsoft is in the forefront of always thinking about how to make products accessible to everyone. So it's not only doing good for the world, but it's really making more money. And this is actually what we're trying to do when we're talking with companies like Microsoft, Amazon, Apple, and others. We're showing them, yeah, this is something that is going to do good, but it's also going to help you to do well. And I think that by doing well, you can also do much more impact. So this is our goal in Voiceitt. We're not only building a company that does good, this is actually our first priority always, but also we need to make sure that we do well, because only this way we can do an impact on millions of people around the world. And by the way, specifically if I'm touching speech, speech is not only about people with speech disabilities, it's also the elderly population who, Silicon Valley developers don't usually take into consideration 80 and 90 years old when they test the product and doesn't work for them. It's also about accents, dialects. In India, in Africa, you have thousands of different languages and dialects that are not supported because it's not interesting enough for the big companies to develop a dedicated speech recognition engine for those languages. My native language is Hebrew, and this device, Alexa, the Echo device does not support Hebrew because the population is too small. So Voiceitt can also give access to people who speaks in any native language and any accent.
Thank you, Danny. And LaRonda, maybe you could offer a different perspective in answering this question. Trinity Health, from my understanding, has had to find alternative ways to connect with patients during the pandemic, including digital health opportunities. And so how have you helped ensure that underrepresented communities have access, specifically where there may be broadband deserts?
Oh, that is a good question. Yeah, it is, right? So that's where you develop those relationships with and partnerships with people like Patty and Microsoft, right? So there's a lane that we have as an anchor institution, and there's a responsibility for industries to partner, right? So where we may be in a community that has limited broadband access, right? How do we partner with Microsoft to not only make sure that they have the devices, but then can access the internet? How do we make sure, even when we think about language access services, I'm so excited about the work that these two social entrepreneurs, Syed and Danny, are engaged in. I mean, this is some game-changing, world-changing type stuff. And so at Trinity, we are continuing our partnership. Also, it's critical to work with your local community. They will tell you how to solve their problems. Like, we don't go in, from on high and say, this is how it should be done. You go into those local markets and work with those community leaders because they know the answers to their problems. We come in to support that. And so from our work with community health and well-being, our advocacy work, we are engaged in those communities to answer to help provide solutions to those problems.
Thank you, LaRonda. Patty, it would be great to hear from the corporate perspective how Microsoft is helping to address the digital divide.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And I do have the pleasure of teaming up with LaRonda to support Trinity's needs. I think we look at it from a couple different perspectives. So one is just broadband, who's got broadband access and who doesn't. And we look at it, at least in the US, I'll speak to specifically, we look at it for the rural communities and we look at it for also within the urban communities. Sometimes you step back and you take a look at how healthcare is delivered here in the US, and so much of it is delivered in community health organizations or the local family practitioner. And so we look also at how do we democratize access to health information and the AI models that are out there, and how do we support a family practitioner who may be experiencing a case they've never seen before. So a lot of our work in AI and ML are being able to democratize. And today we ingest tons of PubMed documentation from all different kinds of journals that are out there, and all the clinical trials out on clinicaltrials.gov, so that we can start to get that information into the hands of those delivering care that are locally. And we also have something as simple as we take our PCs and our laptops and we just repurpose them and provide them into communities that don't have access to the devices. Because if I solve the broadband challenge, but we don't have access to devices, they're not going to be able to have the virtual healthcare that is needed. I mean, during COVID, the initial stage of the COVID pandemic, that became pretty clear to us. Like, how do we get virtual care to very remote communities, in some cases that don't have those broadband capabilities? So we were working with communities to light up firehouses, that may have a room that would enable it, libraries, different organizations, and, as LaRonda mentioned, community faith organizations, those that folks turn to for support and also value their opinions. We started working with folks to enable just the digital health that we could deliver during COVID. So thanks for the question, Carrie.
Thank you, Patty. And Syed, I'm curious, sort of a twist on this question. you have a really innovative technology and an innovative approach to deploying that technology. How do you ensure that you keep these opportunities accessible and affordable for a variety of people?
Excellent question. Initially, what we were doing was we were partnering with EHR providers like big cats like Epic, Cerner, Allscripts. We were going after them. Pre-COVID, early 2020, I was in Kenya doing market research, customer discovery interviews with clinicians, and there are a lot of them in Kenya. And I went to a couple of them. They were not using any EHR. They didn't have a health system. They were paper-based. They had patient files. And I asked them about it, and they said, no, if you could, I asked them about their pain point. They said the greatest pain point is that a woman comes in, she is in labor. She says that she had surgery. She had surgery done here for her pregnancy, but we do not know who she is. We do not have her records. I mean, we have her records. It's a room full of medical files in the back, but we don't know which one belongs to her. And I asked her, how can I solve that problem for you? And this is verbatim. This is a this is an old lady, and she goes like, Abrar, dear, if you could just tell me the file number of that patient, that would save her life and make our lives easier. Which got me the idea that we don't need to partner with any EHR or manufacturer. This can be a standalone application in itself. Just provide the biometrics, it saves the patient records, you put in the patient file number and store it with the file. Next time the patient comes in, scan the biometric and they get the medical records. It's simple. It makes it more affordable and more simpler for them to use, because without having to break bank and deploy health systems. So that's how we decided to tackle this problem for underserved communities.
Thank you, Syed. Danny and LaRonda, this next question would be great for you to provide perspectives from a smaller startup company globally, and LaRonda from a large healthcare delivery system. Addressing health equity requires resources, human capital, and financial resources. How do you get leaders in your business to champion putting money behind this goal? LaRonda, do you want to kick us off?
I can. I can. I think I'm just fortunate enough to work for an organization that's not something that we have to twist our leaders' arms to do. From the highest level of leadership, from our board of directors, from our CEO, and all those who sit in the C-suite, they are personally and professionally committed to advancing equity and advancing health equity. And that is evidenced in the amount of resources that they allocate to the work to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's evident in the amount of money that we commit, whether it's grant dollars or partnerships in our community. Even the work, how we deploy resources during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so while a large healthcare delivery system is complex, particularly, you know, when you're across 25 states, there's 25 different cultures, so many different hospitals, it is complex. But when you have a commitment at that level, it makes the work a bit easier. It doesn't make it less complex, but the commitment and the resources behind that commitment is present. Like something that I thought was just so amazing that we did during the height of the COVID pandemic in those communities that were, you know, less likely to be, you know, vaccinated, sort of suspicious, and rightfully so, is that we partnered, Trinity Health did a social media campaign called It Starts Here. And we literally use social influencers in those communities to educate around COVID-19 and to encourage education, encourage testing. And so just being innovative, and we aren't able to do those things if we don't have the buy-in from those who govern us and those who lead us.
Thank you, LaRonda. And I really appreciate your example of access to COVID vaccines as an opportunity for health equity and backing that financially. Danny, you have raised capital, both philanthropic capital and venture-backed capital. how do you get investors and grant makers to buy into the health equity opportunity?
That's a great question, and it's actually has been my focus, and a lot of my energy is going to this direction. But first, maybe internally, I want to say that leaders in my company, one of the reasons they are so dedicated to the mission of Voiceitt is because many of them has a personal connection to what we're doing. Our product manager has a daughter with special needs. My partner, Sarah, has had a grandmother who had Parkinson's. So many of our employees have a personal connection, and this is why they work day and night, very dedicated, because they have seen that in their families or seeing that in their families. Externally speaking, so starting a social impact venture fund is not easy. Because it's harder to show a strong ROI. Like, it's not going to be the next Google. It could be, but it's harder to show. So our first focus was actually, as you said, Carrie, the kind of non-dilutive funding, and we've seen a lot of support. We received around $5 million of non-dilutive funding from grants through governments, winning prizes that corporates are giving to social impact companies. Microsoft is a good example, but also Verizon and Philips and others. And this helped us to kick off this venture. Without the support of government, of the European Commission, the Israeli Innovation Authority, the US government, and those prizes that we received, we couldn't even start the venture. But once you start to show the real value to the users, once you start to show the impact, and the impact even beyond people with special needs, as I mentioned, for the elderly population, for unsupported languages and dialects, then it is starting to be interesting also to kind of the more venture fund capital, to corporates, but also VCs. And this is when you can really start to create a stronger team and scale your venture.
Thank you, Danny. I see we have a couple questions from the audience about the Global Good Fund, so I can address those. One question is about how wonderful it is to see a focus on BIPOC entrepreneurs. And question is, how does the Global Good Fund find these individuals and focus on underrepresented individuals? So the answer here is that we partner with 250 grassroots organizations to get the word out that the Global Good Fund Fellowship exists and that we're very interested in funding all kinds of entrepreneurs. Now, for our entire history, which is a whopping 10 years, we have always invested in the best entrepreneurs that we can find. It turns out that half of those entrepreneurs have been women and about 2/3 have been Black or Brown entrepreneurs, which is consistent with what society looks like. There has never been a quota or a focus on investing in Black or Brown or women entrepreneurs. We just invest in the best entrepreneurs that we can find. So that's the honest answer to your question. And I understand why right now it seems it makes Global Good Fund look good, but the truth is we always unapologetically support the best entrepreneurs we can find. And what that means is sometimes we end up rejecting entrepreneurs who we wish we could support due to not having enough philanthropy to support everyone. We get over 3,000 applicants a year, and we support 12 entrepreneurs in the Global Fellowship Program. And so there's not a possibility to send full commentary to everyone that does not get accepted, but I do personally see the applicants, and there is so much talent out in the world that could be addressing and is actively addressing health inequity across the country and globally. And we really appreciate the work that everyone is doing, whether folks are accepted to the fellowship or not.
So Carrie, following on that, with so much talent out there in the world, let's do a little bit of a round robin now among our panelists. And let's talk about how we make the moment in front of us, or what's our call to action. LaRonda, I'll start with you, and then we'll go to Danny, Syed, and Carrie will have you bring us home.
I was hoping I would be last so I could think of something really, Patty, I was thinking I could think of something really witty as they go, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So if I just went off the cuff, because I am, right? So what can you do is to start. sometimes you get so overwhelmed with, oh my God, I'm just a person, or oh my God, you know, my organization is too small, I don't have enough influence. An avalanche starts with some small snowball rolling down a hill. And so I would just say, in its simplest form as possible, just get started. Pick an area that you are passionate about, pick an area of justice, and just do the work. Just do the work.
Awesome. Thank you. Danny?
Well, there are so many things I wanted to ask, but I guess I can have only one wish, so I will focus on that. The videos that you saw, this technology already works. It's out there. You can actually download the application for free from the App Store. But the current technology, the speech technology that we developed, is what we call discrete speech recognition. This means that if Michael, that you saw, wants to use Alexa, he needs to train individually, turn on the light, turn on the TV, play music, and etc. The next thing that we're now developing is what we call fluent speech, the ability to support fluent speech. So imagine that you're talking now with someone with Microsoft Teams, someone with a speech disability, and you'll be seeing in real time live transcription of what he is saying, and you'll be able to understand him in real time, no matter what word or sentence he is saying. So in order to develop this fluent speech support, we need a lot of data. And in a month from now, we are going to launch a campaign, a data collection campaign, which will, we've developed a tool that enables people with speech disabilities to donate their voice data, but actually to record their voice samples. This will help us to accelerate the development of the fluent speech. And I call everyone to help us to connect to individuals and organizations that have people with speech disabilities and wants to participate in this data collection campaign, because that will help us to help millions of people. Another interesting aspect, because I know that the audience is very diverse, we are also happy to get data of different language and dialects around the world, in India, in Africa, and even in Europe, like any language that is under-supported or is not currently supported by Siri or Alexa or Google Assistant. So this is also an area of interest, because we want to be able to support any language and any dialect. Thank you.
So we've gone from donating blood to donating our voice, and our sounds great. Syed, over to you.
Okay, so I'm going to echo what LaRonda said. If you have a skill, if you are in a position to share your skills or mentor a budding talent, do it, especially in health equity. If you can do that, definitely do it. If you're not, then start learning. You see, when I started off, I was a complete like a pure technologist. I had no idea about HIPAA. I had no idea about GDPR, fire standards. I had to learn all of that to build a solution which would impact the healthcare ecosystem. So start from there and do the work, like LaRonda said. I would definitely get behind that.
It sounds like we all have talents and gifts that we can contribute to this, and we just need to get started to push that snowball down the hill, LaRonda, so we can have an amazing avalanche of impact. Speaking of avalanches of impact, Carrie, you all do such tremendous work at the Global Good Fund. Would you like to close out this great program for us?
Sure. Thank you, Patty. So in terms of what I think all of us can do to make a difference in terms of addressing health inequity locally and around the globe, you know, my advice here would be to open the door. And the reason I share that is because when we assess what's the most compelling, most meaningful aspect of the Global Good Fund Fellowship, one of the points of data that comes back is when people give access to an opportunity that wouldn't otherwise exist, it can be life-changing, not only for an individual, but for that person's entire community. And so the
Well, everyone, it looks like we hit a little bit of a technical freeze with with Carrie. It looks like she's frozen. So I'll finish up with just a couple words to everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Excuse me. I have the special pleasure of serving on the board of the Global Good Fund. I've had the pleasure of serving as a mentor to Danny, and I have the pleasure of working with LaRonda and Syed in a work capacity. So it's been my pleasure to serve as the moderator for today. Thank you for joining us. I hope you'll take the nuggets of wisdom this esteemed panelists have provided and just grab that call to action for all of us to begin to take the first steps to improving health equity locally and then hopefully globally. Thank you all again. We wish you all a wonderful day. Take care.